Bonjour tout le monde, bon midi. Merci d'être avec nous aujourd'hui pour cette causerie avec le ministre des Transports du Canada, Omar Alghabra. D'abord, je tiens à vous remercier puis à nous excuser. On avait prévu cet événement plus tôt cette semaine, puis pour une des rares fois, on a eu des problèmes techniques qui nous ont littéralement empêchés de tenir la rencontre. Monsieur Alghabra a été nommé ministre en janvier dernier, donc c'est tout récent. C'est sa première tribune à la Chambre. Je vais parler avec le ministre en anglais. On a convenu de ça parce que son français est encore en apprentissage. Mais Minister, I was just saying that we're going to have this discussion in English, that you're in the process of polishing your French, and I think it makes sense for everyone to be able to understand clearly what you want to say. The transport is really a file, an area, a responsibility that is at the core of preoccupation in the community. Even before the pandemic, we were looking at the airport and all the planned investment to increase the capacity, just because the airport has found back its hub status, and it was in a very fast-growing mode. We had already the Port of Montreal with the expansion in Contrecoeur. Now, before the pandemic, we had the blocus ferroviaire, the blockage of the rails, and eventually there was even a strike at the CN. So, as a minister, Minister Garneau was solicited all the time. And now, ahead of us, we will have many investments required in public transit and also the infrastructures themselves. Airport still will need some support. And clearly, for us, as a minister, you play a key role. Lastly, an area that we want to cover is the fact that we have borders are still shut. We had the discussion with Minister Garneau very recently. I understand that even today there'll be an announcement of how things should evolve. But clearly, from a business standpoint, from a business perspective, airports are very important. Now, before, Minister, I give you the floor, I'd like to acknowledge a tragedy that happened in London, Ontario, not far from your riding, actually. And I think from a Montreal perspective and for all Canadians, our thoughts are with the victims, the young boy, the family, the friends, and the Muslim community. And I want to extend a very strong message of support for the Muslim community all across Canada. From a business perspective, we believe that everyone should feel safe and should have all the opportunity in the world in Canada. So I want to say that our thoughts are with all of you. So, Minister, the floor is yours.
Merci, Michel, and thank you very much. Bonjour, tout le monde. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. It's actually just afternoon right now. Let me first say I'd like to acknowledge that I am joining you virtually today from the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. I also would like to take a moment to acknowledge how difficult the last 2 weeks have been. First, the tragic discovery of the 215 innocent Indigenous children at the former residential school site in Kamloops, BC. Words could never be strong enough to condemn this national tragedy. It's not just our history, but it continues to be our present, and it is a stark reminder for all of us to continue the important work towards reconciliation, which I know Canadian businesses and Quebec businesses are committed to. Second, to your point, Michel, the murder of a family in London, Ontario, who were out for a walk just last Sunday. It is beyond comprehension how such a heinous act could happen in a Canadian neighborhood. It is also a sober reminder for all of us that hate and Islamophobia exist, and if not confronted, it could kill. And I appreciate your words of comfort, Michel, on behalf of yourself, the Chamber, and Quebec business. Thank you for having me here today. And let me say, j'aime Montréal, et j'aimerais être avec vous en personne aujourd'hui. I apologize, by the way, for the technical mishap that occurred on Monday. I had a conversation with my laptop. It seems that my laptop is still upset at Montreal since the Habs leaves Sirius, and apparently it refused to cooperate. But Michelle, thanks again to you and your team for understanding, and for all of you for giving me and my computer another chance. Montreal's energy is contagious. On Monday morning, I had the opportunity of meeting with 4 startups in the transportation industry that were launched in the HEC Montreal incubator. I truly enjoyed these meetings and cannot wait to be back sur le terrain, comme vous dites. As Minister of Transport, I'm focused on ensuring our transportation is safe, secure, environmentally responsible, and efficient in moving people and goods in Quebec and across all Canada, and all across Canada. I assure you, in few weeks, I will be getting over Montreal's victory over the Leafs. And I look forward to the days when sports fans and all Canadians can travel freely from one city to another to follow their sports team, to be tourists and visitors in places like Montreal, and attend events at the Bell Centre. Today, I'm going to talk to you about our government's various initiatives to support even more efficient transportation in Montreal and across Quebec. But I want to mention that it's really teamwork, and I work closely with my incredible fellow ministers from Montreal and throughout La Belle Province, all over Quebec. Our government and our caucus is fortunate to have strong representation from Quebec, working every day on advancing matters that Quebecers and Quebec businesses care about. And on that note, I'd like to recognize that my parliamentary secretary, Soraya Martinez-Ferrada, has joined us online, and I want to express my gratitude to her for her tireless work on matters that are important to Quebecers and Quebec businesses. Let's talk about the transportation corridor between Toronto and Quebec City, which includes Montreal. Les corridors entre Québec et Toronto est important pour notre économie et pour nos communautés. And work is currently underway that could revolutionize transportation in this corridor. The high-frequency rail project will transform passenger rail service by offering faster, more reliable, and more frequent service. La grande fréquence peut transformer le transport. This project would reduce travel time between many cities, including Montreal and Toronto. And as rail is one of the lowest emitting modes of transportation, it would provide a more environmentally friendly travel option for Quebecers and all Canadians. And we have to do it correctly. That is why a thorough assessment of the project is underway. In Budget 2021, proposed almost $500 million for rail infrastructure investments for this project. This will reduce existing bottlenecks and improve fluidity and connectivity in the corridor between Toronto and Quebec City. Of course, there's another transformative rail passenger transportation project underway for Montreal. The Réseau Express Metropolitan, also called REM, is the largest public transit project undertaken in Quebec in 50 years. I'm proud that our federal government has invested $1.2 billion in the REM. It will improve mobility and connectivity across Montreal, and its all-electric trains will support our efforts to fight climate change. REM rail lines are also an important part of the new Samuel de Champlain Bridge, and if I may say, thanks again to the thousands of workers au travail and to my colleague François-Philippe Champagne for his leadership for that project. To be a true success, the REM needs to be efficiently connected to transportation hubs like the Montreal Trudeau International Airport. Earlier this spring, our government announced $400 million, additional $400 million in financial support for the new ramp station at the Montreal Airport. Our airports, of course, as mentioned by Michelle, are another example of transportation infrastructure that is important for our communities and for our economy. We know that a strong and competitive air transport industry is vital for our recovery and for the well-being of Quebecers and all Canadians. We depend on air transport to deliver goods and connect people from coast to coast to coast, as well as internationally. Now, we all know that the global COVID-19 pandemic caused a huge and sudden decline in passenger traffic. This had major implications for Quebec's and for all of Canada's air carriers and airports. Earlier this spring, our government reached an agreement with Air Canada to protect jobs, support air services that Quebecers need, while ensuring commitments to regional services and refunds for passengers. In addition to Air Canada, our government also secured recently a financial agreement with Air Transat, an important company in Quebec. Notre gouvernement soutient Air Transat. And we continue to negotiate with other large air carriers to achieve similar outcomes. To help airports recover from the effects of the pandemic, we also have new contribution funding programs. One of those programs is the Airport Critical Infrastructure Program. It will provide financial assistance to Canada's larger airports for critical infrastructure projects related to safety, security, and connectivity. And the ramp station I mentioned at the Montreal Trudeau International Airport is one of the projects receiving funding through this program. I also want to recognize today that Canada's aerospace industry is the world's 5th largest and is made up of 700 companies of all sizes from coast to coast to coast, including many in the Greater Montreal, in Laval, in the North Shore and South Shore of Montreal, and beyond, including, by the way, in communities like mine in Mississauga. And Budget 2021 has dedicated $2 billion to our aerospace sector to support our world-class companies and talented workforce. Another key initiative which has supported critical infrastructure projects and bolstered economic activity is the National Trade Corridor Fund. The National Trade Corridors Fund has contributed nearly to $100 million in the Greater Montreal area in recent years, leveraging total investment of more than $320 million. These transportation infrastructure projects will support international air cargo traffic at Montreal Mirabel International Airport, improve rail and road traffic to and from the Port of Montreal, and increase efficiency, capacity, and security at the port. And I'm excited that the budget includes almost $2 billion to recapitalize this fund, so we can continue supporting important projects that will position Canada as we build back better out of the COVID-19 pandemic. This will help businesses across our supply chains, including many here in Montreal. Le Fonds va soutenir plusieurs entreprises dans le Grand Montréal, à Laval, sur la rive sud et la rive nord, by making transportation more fluid and alleviating congestion. Whether it is at the Port of Montreal or along the St. Lawrence Seaway, we know that making these investments now will be vital to our economic recovery and a cleaner future. I also cannot come here today to talk to you without addressing the Connorseur Port Terminal Expansion Project. Last March, we announced the environmental assessment decision on the project. And the decision is that the project can proceed. This is good news because the project will help create good jobs for Quebecers while respecting existing environmental regulations. Now, in closing, let me emphasize that safe and efficient transportation is essential for our communities and to build back better right here in Montreal. This is why we will continue to invest in transportation options in Montreal that have concrete and positive impacts for Montrealers and all Québécois, pour tous les Québécois. Again, I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak with you today. Thank you, Michel, and thank you to the Montreal Chamber of Commerce. Merci de m'avoir permis de vous parler aujourd'hui. Au plaisir de vous croiser sur les rues de Montréal prochainement. I apologize. Thank you.
Thank you,
Merci.
Minister. No. Thank you, Minister, and thank you for having agreed to have this conversation with me. First, I want to tell you, you probably saw it when we had the game with the Leafs, that we can now have people in the stadium. So I just want to say, since the Canadians are now the king of the North, and we are going to represent Canada in the playoffs from now on, you're very welcome to wear your Canadian shirt, and you can come to the Bell Center whenever you want. I think we can be very, very honored in Montreal to represent Canada. Now, coming back.
Say, go Habs, go.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. No, I think you're on record now, so we're going to use that. Just to come back, last week we hosted the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Marc Garneau, and in the discussions that we had, he mentioned that you were in ongoing talks with our international partners, Canadians and Canada's international partners, notably on vaccine passports, border reopening, quarantine requirements. Now, can you tell us a bit what's your role in those discussions with our partners?
Sure. Let me just say to express my gratitude to Minister Garneau. When I filled in for his in his shoes, those are big shoes to fill in for, and Minister Garneau has been doing a lot of excellent work in transportation, and I am building on all the work that he's done. So I want to express my gratitude and thanks to him. And yes, absolutely right. Look, transportation, the Ministry of Transport is implicated and is involved in our plans of restarting travel. And that also includes the discussion of what travel is going to look like post-COVID or in the transition period, because I think we all recognize that we are going to have a phased out reopening. It's not going to happen overnight. It cannot turn a switch on immediately. So what are the measures? And you're right, today, by the way, there's an announcement, I think, that's happening as I'm speaking to you right now. What are the measures that we need to take? Because we need to restart. Of course, we need to restart travel. We need to do it safely. And we need to do it smartly, so we don't discover that we maybe started too soon or opened too fast, and having to take back some of the gains we made. And part of that effort is obviously will include a certificate that will verify that travelers have been vaccinated, and that. The mechanism for that certificate, in order for it to be efficient and effective, it needs to be coordinated with our international partners. So we are having discussions domestically at home, myself, my colleagues from the Ministry of Health, Minister of Immigration, Minister of Public Safety, who's responsible for border security, and myself are having this discussion, but also we're talking to our friends in the US, we're talking to our friends in the EU, we're talking to other countries, and we're talking to the International Civil Aviation Agency, we're talking to G7. So there are a variety of forums where these discussions are taking place to ensure that we have a coordinated plan, that we have a standard that countries can follow, so we reduce bottlenecks and we ensure a high degree of efficiency.
Thank you, Minister. Let's look into some of these elements of what you just discussed. First, let's look at the mandatory hotel quarantine that exists in Canada. Our understanding is that we were alone in imposing that on our travelers, that other countries have not done so. Now, when I speak to the business community, and I can tell you they call me almost every day these days, and they say, okay, this must stop. Maybe it made sense in the past. We weren't sure whether it was needed. But now, obviously, with the number of people who got at least one shot and what's happening elsewhere in the world, we need to stop this 3-day quarantine requirement. Now, what's your stand on that? Are we there? Should we? I mean, we believe we should do it right now. Tomorrow we should say it's over. What's your response to that?
Michel, let me just say how difficult the pandemic has been on our economy and our businesses, particularly businesses who are in the aviation sector, businesses who are in the tourism sector. It's been really, really difficult. And let me say, from day one, we told Canadians as a government that our priority is the protection of their health and safety. And we had to make tough decisions and impose very challenging measures. Understandably, they are difficult, but they were necessary to protect the health and safety of Canadians. And we've added different measures at the borders, all to ensure the protection and safety of Canadians. And the Premier Legault, Premier Ford in my province, and other premiers have been supporters of those measures, and some actually were asking for more. So those layers of protections were temporary. Yes, they're necessary, but we knew they were temporary. And as you know, we've commissioned, the Minister of Health had commissioned an expert panel on testing to do a report, and that report was issued a couple of weeks ago. That report has issued several recommendations about steps moving forward. And, one of their recommendation is the phasing out of the government approved accommodation. And my understanding, by the way, I don't know if I'll be making news, but my understanding that the Minister of Health is announcing as we speak that fully vaccinated Canadians will be exempted from the hotel accommodation moving forward. So I don't know when the exact date will be for that implementation, but today we're announcing that fully vaccinated Canadians will be exempted. And that is a way to also to let Canadians know that it's really important to continue this momentum that we're seeing, incredible momentum that we're seeing, how Canadians are really getting their shots. So I want to applaud everyone for doing so. I want to encourage those who are eligible to go do so, and that they will have benefits at the borders.
Well, that's a good news. Of course, you did not mention the date. We hope the minister said it's tomorrow, not in a month's time, which wouldn't make sense. Let's talk about the tourists. We're talking about Canadians here, and there are words that we would say, okay, Canadian, it's not mandatory, or Canadian can come if they are doubly vaccinated, but maybe not the tourists. Now, when we are in a world where what you do to one is done back to yourself, if we say tourists here cannot, then it might mean that Canadians abroad would not be treated with similar standards than locals. So can we say that as we move forward, if we recognize the value of having the 2 doses of vaccination, what's good for Canadians is also good for British citizens, or for Americans, or for Japanese citizens?
Yeah, Michel, I appreciate your question. And look, one of some of the borders measures that we put in place is also ways to reduce volume of movement. Look, in the province of Quebec, there were measures that included curfew, that asked people not to visit their neighbors, not to visit their family members. So it is in the framework of the public policy. Their objective is to reduce potential for transmission. And that is the reason why we have suspended foreign travel into Canada. Again, those measures are temporary. And as I said earlier, that we will be phasing out. I look forward to the day where all of these measures will be lifted, but they're not going to be lifted altogether. We're going to have to be smart. We're going to have to be thoughtful. and prudent in how we start adjusting our measures. And today's announcement is really good for Canadians who are fully vaccinated. I don't think in our first measure we're going to start opening up the borders completely. We're going to continue to monitor progress. We're going to continue to monitor vaccination rates, infection rates, all of those. Also, the situation around the world. As you know, COVID doesn't understand boundaries. So we have to watch COVID situation across the world. So I can assure you that we will get there. I just don't know how quickly we're going to get there. I hope we can get there soon. It's probably not going to happen as part of the first phase of reopening, but hopefully it's going to happen soon.
Okay. Well, Minister, you understand, and I'm sure you sense our impatience. We won't. I won't ask any more questions on this, but let's remind ourselves that from a business community standpoint, the last thing you want is to know that your competitors across the world are meeting on a very fluid basis, and that you, within your community, you have constraints that make it less fluid, because it's putting ourselves at a disadvantage. So we just have to keep that in mind and be as quick as we can, because it makes sense economically, and if, of course, sanitarily speaking, it's prudent. Now, let's come back to, yes.
I may just quickly respond, because I hear you and I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate your advocacy, but I also want to draw on a lesson that we saw recently in Ontario in March, where there was a reduction of infection rate and there was a pressure on reopening or reducing restrictions. And, perhaps the decision now in hindsight is that maybe happened too early and we ended up finding ourselves in a third wave in Ontario. So what I'm trying to say is that in order to protect public health, is also important really to protect businesses, because if we open up too soon, we might regret it later on and may end up imposing more measures on businesses that will be counterproductive. So I think it's in the best interest of our businesses that we are prudent. And of course, I hear you. We need to open up as quickly as possible, but we need to do it prudently so we don't regret it later on.
Yeah, clearly, and obviously the vaccination that was not present in March changes things. So we'll see. Now let's come back to your more standard files. Let's talk a bit about rail transportation. I was very pleased to hear you speak of the high frequency train. The first question, and maybe it's a yes or no answer, but there's rumors here and there that we're still considering whether it should be a high-speed train instead of a high-frequency trains. Now, is your view very clear on that? We are now looking at one project. We made enough road on this one. It's about the high-frequency train?
Yeah, look, I acknowledge that there was a debate on this, and it's a good debate. It's a healthy debate. When you're building infrastructure, you need to make sure that you're going about it the right way. I would say that for us, the debate is settled, and for a variety of reasons. But let me just say the most important reason, at least in my mind, is that if we intend on connecting the communities that we want to connect, it will make it difficult for high-speed rail to be effective. Because if we want to connect Quebec City through Montreal, through Trois-Rivières, for example, by the time the high-speed rail picks up speed, it will have to slow down. So it will be, not really as effective or as useful. So why do that? Because it's important for us that we connect certain communities and expand movements of goods and people. So I think the debate is settled for our government. Our intention is to go for high frequency rail.
And just to clarify the budgetary situation, you mentioned the $500 million that were in the budget. It was for rail infrastructure in that corridor. Now, when we look at the estimate of the high-frequency train, numbers that I have are anywhere between $6 billion and $8 billion, perhaps depending on whether you electrify the system or not. So what should we expect? That within a year, we will have a better idea of the budget, the total budget of the project, and then the decision will be made at the time whether we fund this entire big project?
Yeah, look, Michel, as you and your members know, that these massive projects sometimes happen in interval. You first take a step. So, for example, a couple of years ago, we created the joint office between VIA, the Canada Infrastructure Bank, and the Department of Transport to study this idea. This was where the debate happened about high speed, high frequency, the route, etc. And then now we're moving to the next step where we committed $500 million to start the implementing this project. So yes, you're right. The project is going to cost clearly more than $500 million. I think I want to, and I agree, I've heard the same estimates that you're repeating. I just want to avoid saying those numbers just now because I know there are still options that need to be finalized before we're able to say what the final price is going to be. But yes, to your point, I'm hopeful that in a year or so we have better answers. We need to engage, by the way, VIA, we need to engage communities, we need to engage private sector on the options before us, on decisions that need to be made. And I hope that in a year or so, we're going to have further answers, further clarifications, further options to be decided upon and explored. But let me just say, $500 million is no small amount just for one project. So it's a sincere and a serious commitment that will really put some shovels in the ground and start the project in earnest.
And I agree, Minister. We never, from the private sector, we never take $500 million lightly. And at the same time, this project has been discussed for so long that at one point it's just like, let's keep the momentum in the decision making. So, so that's why we're saying, okay, a good step was made a few years ago when we said we're going to have a team that will look at the project. Now the $500 million is a major step, but there's another one coming that will be a huge decision to make together. Let's go to the Port of Montreal. You mentioned, and I was very pleased to hear that, but I just want to make sure that we understand it the same way. You mentioned that the Contrecoeur project, which is a project that has the full support of the community here, got support from the Banque de l'Infrastructure, which was very good, and then had the environmental assessment decision that was positive. Now, we still hear here and there people trying to block the project. In your mind, is it clear that now every step that had to be undertaken was undertaken, and that this project is ready to shovel starting now? It's all the go ahead has been given.
Look, the environmental assessment is a major achievement, and it's a positive one. So I was happy to hear that the green light has been given. That this project, I know the importance of this project, not only for the port and not only for the region, for Quebec, but honestly for the entire country, including region like mine that depends quite a bit on goods being transported through the Port of Montreal. So yes, it's great news, and the fact that the Infrastructure Bank is also supportive. This is great news, and I am looking forward to attending whenever that happens. The beginning of that project. I have to check on what the next steps are, to be honest. But this is really an important milestone for that project.
Minister Alghabra, I used to say to your predecessor, Marc Garneau, whenever we were having a discussion that, he did not know it, but he was also Minister for Economic Development because of the sheer size of the investment and the impact they would have on the economy. He would be a Minister for the Economy. Now, I would say that you are also a Minister for the Environment now, and I want to take you on the ground of electrification of transport. As you're probably aware, because the Prime Minister was there, we have a company in the Montreal area called Lion. And what Lion does, it builds electric trucks. Now, over the last decade, governments at the federal level and provincial level develop policies, eventually program and incentives to incite individuals to move away from petrol cars or gas fuel cars towards electric cars. Could you envisage a similar strategy, aggressive strategy in Canada to incite all the businesses, the fleet owners, to shift towards the electric trucks over the next 5 years, let's say, just so that we accelerate this transition that will benefit for our economy, obviously, but also for the environment?
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. And let me just say to your point about the environment and transportation, the second largest source of emission in our economy, in our country, comes from transportation. And if we are serious about meeting our goal of net zero by 2050, we must make a significant improvement on cutting emissions from the transportation sector. We cannot get there without doing so. Half of those emissions from the transportation sector, by the way, comes from light duty vehicles. So that's why Transport Canada has been really involved and an important partner in implementing policies that help the transition into technologies that are zero emissions. So, for example, we've implemented an incentive for zero emission vehicles. Now, those are light duty vehicles, but you combine our federal initiative incentive with for example, Quebec's incentive. You're talking about $13,000 that a Quebecer can have a rebate when they're buying an electric vehicle, and that is significant. That's why today Quebec has almost close to 10%, 9% of their new vehicles being purchased that are zero emission vehicles. And that's great. And we need to build on that, because 10%, to be honest, is not enough. We need to go a step further. So yes, while perhaps now the immediate and the lowest hanging fruit is the light duty vehicles, but we have to tackle heavy duty vehicles, including trucks. We have to tackle airplanes. We have to tackle marine transportation as well. So those are elements of our plan. And by the way, we also have to ensure that we have the right infrastructure for those vehicles to be utilized, and for passengers to have convenience in accessing charging stations, etc. So our plan is comprehensive. There's more work that is needed, but I'm sorry if I'm giving you a long answer to here's a short an answer. Yes, I envision part of our plan in the very near future to continue. By the way, we've invested and we've supported companies like Lyon. The companies you're referring to, our government has made investments, and we will continue to invest in these technologies, but we'll also find other measures to help accelerate the adoptions of those vehicles.
The other element that from a Montreal perspective is important is we're trying to see whether we can play a role in developing better batteries for cars, for all the electric vehicles. So I was wondering, from a transport minister, how do you collaborate with economic development, pure economic development, in all those components that are key for transport and also key for the environment? Do you see yourself as, I would say, maybe developing a strategy in Canada to accelerate the development of batteries, Canadian-made batteries? That would be a very good positioning for the future. How do you see that?
Yeah, look, this is what is unique about Canada. We know where, first of all, we know where the future is heading. We know that the future is heading toward the electrification, not only of automobiles, but of a variety, almost every other modes of transportation. And we also know that we have all the raw material and the talented workforce that uniquely positions us in the world. And that's why, I'm really proud to be part of this government who has been investing in consolidating and in supporting the supply chain for batteries production, for vehicles and other modes of transportation. And that initiative is led by my colleague, Minister Champagne. Prior to him, Minister Baines have worked with companies, including automakers, on signing deals to ensure that we have manufacturing facilities here at home in Quebec and in Ontario and across Canada. So, and I know Minister Champagne is seized with this. Yes, we agree with you, Michelle. We agree that Canada has a unique advantage in its ability to produce and build more batteries and more technologies that will help battery operated equipment, and this is going to attract more businesses to invest here in Canada, in Quebec, to create more jobs, to create more business opportunities for entrepreneurs. And this is a great example of why our also environmental agenda is really a key economic agenda. It is going to spur investment, it's going to create jobs, and it's going to create more profitable opportunities for our businesses.
Excellent, Minister. It's very good that we can see clearly a strategy for Canada that will create wealth and at the same time improve our environmental record. Maybe a last question or a series of questions, of course, about public transit. Your government is completely aligned with, I think, the business community. We need to invest in public transit. It used to be that you would attract investment. Eventually, you'd look into how do you transport workers, and now we know that if we want to develop areas, we need to have public transit systems that are efficient. So the federal support through the Banque de l'Investissement du Canada is completely welcome. Now, one thing that is happening right now is we seem to be working by big projects. At one point, we decide we're going to build a REM, or at other point, we decide we're going to build the subway line. And from the business community, it seems as if it's always a huge debate because it's a huge number, because it's a huge project. And what we're saying is, why don't we have a strategy by which we continuously expand the public transit system year after year with budgets to do that, and we stop seeing that as a one-time big decision every 10 years, and we see that as a normal investment on a yearly basis to make sure that our systems develop themselves. So, of course, the province, we're asking the same question to the province. We're saying, okay, can we have a strategy where it's a normal thing to do every year as opposed to a big debate once per 10 years? What's your view on this type of approach?
I couldn't agree with you more, Michelle. And in fact, our government agrees with you. That's why my colleague, Minister McKenna, Catherine McKenna, announced earlier this year a historic $15 billion that affords or provides annual sustainable funding for public transit across the country. So this significant investment, this significant allocated money is meant to support provinces and municipalities and communities in building and operating infrastructure projects or existing projects to help operate public transit. Because again, we believe public transit is vital, not only for our economy, but also for our agenda to combat climate change. So we heard you, in fact, loud and clear. We heard municipalities about their need to bridge the gap of funding shortages that exist. And this $15 billion, and let me repeat the number, $15 billion is a significant step in that direction.
Well, thank you, Minister Alghabra. It was a very good discussion. Thank you for agreeing for the discussion. Of course, we're going to look into how quickly we can reopen the borders and make sure that we can resume doing business more fluidly internationally. And again, you're always welcome to come and cheer for the Canadians at the Bell Center whenever you want. So again, thank you very much. And for all of you, pour tous, I was just going to say, and if you're available this Friday for everyone that's listening, we're going to have la mairesse de Montréal, Valérie Plante, qui vient terminer notre saison ce vendredi midi à notre tribune. We're going to have the mayoress of Montreal coming this Friday at noon. Of course, it's an electoral year in Quebec during the fall, so it will be an important moment with the mayoress on this Friday. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.